Hey y'all, so in this video I'm going to show you how to isolate. Personally, I prefer a 45-degree isolation tweezer or a curved tweezer. So there is many different types of tweezers. There's also this type of curved tweezer as opposed to this one. It's a little bit more curved. There's also one even more curved that's called a J-curve. I personally like to isolate mostly with 45 degrees just because I feel like it doesn't take up too much space as opposed to a tweezer like this. It just, see how it's so much tweezer right there. You're gonna, once you go into like once you go into place, I feel like the tweezer, since it's so big, kind of gets in the way, as opposed to a 45-degree tweezer. There's not much of a tweezer there to get in the way. See the difference? So that's just why I prefer 45 degrees. Now, when it comes to isolation, you want to make sure that your wrist is always down. You never want to be isolating and your wrist is like this, because when your wrist is up and you're trying to isolate over here, it's just gonna be, let me zoom out. It's just gonna be like, let's say your wrist is up like this and you're trying to isolate, you have to turn your tweezer this way to isolate. But if your wrist is down and you're isolating, there's no cramps that you're gonna have in your hands. So that's the first thing. You always want to make sure that your wrist is down. The inside of your wrist is facing down. Now, when you're going to isolate, whichever way the lash is growing, you see these here in the middle are growing straight. So you're going to be isolating in the direction of the natural lash, the way it grows. So since these are growing straight, your tweezer is going to be straight. Now, if over here, these see how these on the left are coming to the side? So you want to turn your wrist this way, turn your hand this way, make your tweezer go in this direction, so that you get the perfect amount of open space. And your tweezer's not, like, let's say like you're like this and the lash is growing this way. It's gonna be, when you go in to put your lash, it's gonna get in the way because you're not going the way. But if you turn it this way and you open, now you have more space. Do you see that? So you always wanna make sure you have your isolation tweezer and the way that the natural lash is growing, in the direction that it's growing, so that it's easier. Now, when it comes to isolating and you don't know how, or you can't get one lash in between your tweezer, now you don't always have to have just one lash in between your tweezer. Isolation just simply means that you have the lash isolated. It doesn't mean it has to be isolated in this way where it's just one in between the tweezer. You can go and isolate by grabbing all the lashes on one side and having it isolated like that, and now that's an isolated lash. So you don't necessarily always have to have it like this. You can also come over here and move them to the other side and place it on this side, as long as you don't get it connected on this lash. Another thing I like to do, I like to help me isolate by using my tweezers. I come over here, grab some of the lashes, pull it to the side. Now I have one side that's isolated, so it's easier for me to come over here and open up on this side. So always use your tweezers to kind of help you. And if a 45-degree tweezer like mine doesn't work for you, try a J-curve. But one thing I don't recommend is a 90-degree tweezer to isolate. Do not use a 90-degree tweezer to isolate. You want to use something that's more out of an angle like this, so it doesn't get in the way. Isolating with a 90-degree tweezer would just be like literally almost impossible. It's not impossible, you can isolate, but the angle of this tweezer is just going to get in the way when you're going for placement. So yeah, make sure you're using your tweezer to help you isolate some of those. Use taping methods. When you use taping methods, let me get some tape. Using taping methods during application really helps you a lot, especially when it comes to isolation. Let's just say like all this side right here had a bunch of lash extensions and you need to move them over because you want to be able to isolate this easier. So you would just get your tape, pull all these lashes to the side and tape them down like this. And now you have these couple lashes that will be easier to isolate because you made space. And if you need to take it off and then do that for the next section and do this so on and so forth, do that if it helps you isolate easier. And then also there's taping back methods to help with isolation. You know, let's just say this mannequin had multiple layers of lashes. You would tape them back like this to expose the second or third layer. So that would also help you with isolation as well. I also do, as a professional lash artist, I like to help me use, or experienced lash artist, I should say, my nail to help me isolate sometimes. Especially like if I'm over here and I need to move this extension out the way, I'll use my finger to help me as well. There's many different ways, but one thing for sure is always use your volume tweezer to help you isolate like this. And then make sure your tweezer is always going in the direction of the lash that it's growing.